Okay, hello and welcome to your homework video. Today we're going to be going over organization, specifically how do we organize an essay, what does a proper outline look like. Then we'll also talk about how to properly quote things and how to cite them as well. And just a caveat, I understand that videos of my voice are a little awkward, so we're just embracing it. And we are going to do this thing. So we'll go through this video together. This is mainly going to be me modeling for you how I would organize an essay, and then modeling the other things too, how I would quote and how I would cite. Your homework is to watch this video and to take any notes that you need to take. I do encourage you to take out pen and paper and be taking notes as we go along. There will be a short quiz in class tomorrow to prove that you have watched this video. So let's get started. We're going to first talk about simply organization. How do I organize my ideas in an essay in AP Lit? And here are our key points. You want to organize by idea, you want to organize chronologically, and you want to organize by shift. You want to do all three of these things at the same time, and this will become more obvious once we look at the model. What you do not want to do is you do not want to organize by device, which is what we taught you in English 1. So what we don't want to see is my first body paragraph is all about all of the metaphors that I can find in this passage. My second body paragraph is about all of the symbols I can find in this passage. My third body paragraph is about all of the imagery I can find in this passage. We do not want to do that. It does not make sense for AP Lit, and I'll explain why in a minute. Another thing to know is that you should play to your strengths. So pick up what you can see in this passage and then write that into your essay. I'm going to show you one example of what I saw in this passage, the passage we were talking about in class today, and maybe you didn't see those things and you would have written about different things. That is probably fine, as long as you're making sure that you capture the majority of the passage. You want to ensure that you have quotes from the beginning of the passage, from the middle of the passage, and from the end of the passage. You do not ever want to skip a huge chunk of the passage and not talk about it, or just to talk about the first half of the passage and never address the end. You must address the entire passage. Another thing to keep in mind is the last line of the passage. Very, very often, these prose passages that AP chooses are small snippets of novels. And the College Board ends the passage at a particular point for a particular reason. They chose to end it there, meaning that the last paragraph or the last line is really important and you should talk about it. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about the passage we were looking at in class today, which is from chapter 5. This is Miriam's 15th birthday when she's waiting outside of Jaleel's house. So, keeping in mind that I'm organizing by idea, I'm organizing chronologically, and I'm organizing by shift, for my essay, I would do 4 full paragraphs for this essay. My first paragraph would be my introduction, then I would have 2 body paragraphs, and then my 4th paragraph would be my conclusion. For the purposes of this outline, my argument is, I'm going to argue that Miriam is characterized as naive and hopeful at first, but she ultimately becomes disappointed once she gains knowledge of the situation. You might have written a thesis in class today that looks something a little bit different from that, or something very different from that. I'm not saying that means your thesis statement is wrong. I'm just saying this is one way that we can look at this passage. Okay, so my second paragraph is going to be all about Miriam before the shift. And then my third paragraph, or my second body paragraph, is all going to be about Miriam after the shift, or when she changes in this particular passage. So at first I'm going to say that she's naive and hopeful. Then I'm going to say she eventually becomes enlightened, yet disappointed. So then I went through and I would talk about these different pieces from the passage to support my argument that at first she is naive and hopeful. So I would talk about Miriam's flat reflection of the car versus Jalil's tall walls and cypress trees. So there's juxtaposition there, symbolism with the reflection, metaphor, so on and so forth. This quote, the deep-seated glow of her hopes, I would analyze the diction of glow. The hope seems to emanate or shine from her, and it suggests that the glow or light will eventually die out, and we know it does. I would also talk about Miriam's simple sentences. She has very short, simple sentences, which demonstrates that she has a lack of power and she's very childlike. It's naive. Miriam's pointed silence. There are times when she doesn't respond at all, where she'll just be completely silent. So there's one point when she just looks at the driver in response. There's a point where she crosses her arms instead of answering. Again, this proves that she has a lack of power, she's childlike, and she's very stubborn in her hope that Jalil will come. Finally, I would talk about the natural elements of the neighborhood. Just as Miriam is certain that these events, these natural events such as the moon coming out, the crickets chirping, the dogs barking in the neighborhood, just as she's certain that these natural events will happen, she is certain that Jalil will come to her. Eventually we see that change, and the shift is when she becomes a bit more active and knowledgeable. So, in this paragraph, I'm arguing that Miriam eventually becomes enlightened, yet disappointed. So, she becomes more active, the driver fumbles trying to get her, she sheds him, almost like shedding a skin or something like that. She bursts through the door, she's very active and she's seeking that knowledge. Miriam's eyes scan the garden, and we talked a little bit about Jalil's garden and what it looked like in class today. I would argue that this is an allusion to the Garden of Eden, and just as Adam and Eve acquire knowledge, Miriam is acquiring knowledge here. Ultimately, she's going to be disappointed. She recognizes what is occurring, and she rejects the knowledge or the feeling that she has from the knowledge by kicking and refusing to move. And then finally, I would talk about the metaphor of the pebbles, the metaphor for her would-be family and love, spill from her pocket onto the floor, meaning that she has no more hope and she is disappointed. Then in my fourth paragraph, which would be my conclusion, I would take the time to have a really awesome theme statement. So I've organized by idea. Miriam was at first naive and hopeful. Eventually she becomes knowledgeable and disappointed. I organized chronologically. It would be weird if I talked about the ending of the passage first. I talked about how Miriam was first presented and then how she was secondly presented. And I also organized by shift. I want to prove to you that I captured the whole passage and that I paid attention to the last little bit. So in the passage here, I highlighted the things that I would talk about in my essay, whether I would directly quote them or refer to them. So you can see that throughout the passage, I'm talking about the different pieces of there, and there's no big chunk missing. It would look problematic if I took away all of these things, for example, and if I skipped this huge spot in the middle. But I don't do that because I talked about most of the passage. Okay, so looking at these key points again, I organized by idea, I organized chronologically, I organized by shift. I played to my strengths and talked about the things that I noticed, and I captured the whole passage. I didn't ignore chunks or a whole piece. Let's talk about, quote, bullets, not bombs. So this is something that should be a review, so I'm just going to go through it really quickly. Think of the text that you're pulling as short bullet points. Introduce the quote and mix it with your own words. So let's look at some examples. This would be a good example. Hosseini describes Miriam's hope emanating from her body in a soft, deep-seated glow as she approaches Jalil's house. I've only quoted the most important parts here. Most of the sentence is my own, a small quote. This would be bad. Hosseini says, for a moment, Miriam heard Nana's voice in her head, mocking, dousing the deep-seated glow of her hopes. There's just way too much there. I need to focus more into what I'm looking at. The worst type of quote bomb is just throwing that quote in there with absolutely no introduction at all. Do not do this. Do not do this. Okay, finally, let's talk quickly about citation in our essays in AP Lit. Citation is when you give the author credit for the quotes that you've included in your essay. We will do citations for processed essays that you type up and do at home. When we do timed writings in class, do not waste your time putting in citations. You have 40 minutes to write that essay, you need to move. So citations come at the end of a sentence in which there is a quote, and all it is in parentheses, you're putting the last name of the author and the page number. You're not putting a comma, you're not doing anything weird, you're just writing the last name and the page number. So here we have Hosseini, 32. Nothing in between, that's it. So here's an example. The author describes Miriam's home emanating from her body in a soft, deep-seated glow as she approaches Jalil's house. Here I have my quote, so I have the author's last name, the page number, and the period goes after the citation. Once you have mentioned the author's name once, and let's say later down the road you are quoting from that same author, you do not have to put the author's name again, you can just put the page number. So for example, later Miriam kicks the chauffeur as he attempts to remove her from Jalil's garden. Here I've just put 33 because I've already said Hosseini up here. Another option is to mention the author's name in the actual sentence. If you mention the author's name in the sentence, you don't have to put it in the citation at the end. So an example, Hosseini describes Miriam's hope emanating from her body in a soft, deep-seated glow as she approaches Jalil's house. I got that from page 32. Again, I don't have to write Hosseini's name again here because I wrote it here. You will be writing a processed essay and you'll get that assignment tomorrow. In the processed essay, I'm expecting for you to have correct citations. Come back and watch this video if you're confused, or simply Google MLA citations. There'll be tons of websites that will teach you how to do it. The OWL at Purdue website is particularly good. Okay, so thanks for taking the time to watch the video. Take a second to gather your notes and make sure you have everything that you need. As I said, there will be a short quiz in class tomorrow just to prove that you've watched this video and taken time to process it. If you have any questions, please capture those now so that you can ask me tomorrow in class. And that is all. I will see you tomorrow. Bye.